He was Seoul's most feared billionaire, powerful, ruthless, and untouchable. She was just a waitress, brave enough to stand up to him when no one else dared. But that single moment changed everything. Because when Norah challenged Rowan Cho, she didn't just shake his ego. She cracked open the heart he swore he didn't have. Now pride turns to obsession. Obsession turns to love. But love, in a world built on power and reputation, can destroy everything. This is not your typical love story. It's a storm of passion, pride, betrayal, and redemption. When power collides with the heart, who really wins? Stay till the end, because this story will break you, heal you, and make you believe in love all over again. Let's begin. The restaurant pulsed with soft jazz and quiet luxury, walls of amber glass, sleek marble floors, every table set with the precision of a jewel box. It was the kind of place where power whispered, not shouted, until Rowan Cho spoke. "Is this what you call service?" His voice sliced through the air, sharp and commanding. A glass of red wine had tipped across the white tablecloth, staining the cuff of his $1,000 suit. The waitress, Rena, stammered apologies, her trembling hands clutching a napkin. "I'm so sorry, sir, please." Rowan's chair scraped the floor as he stood. The room went silent. His height, his tailored black suit, the cold gleam in his eyes. He looked like a man used to commanding entire boardrooms. "You think sorry fixes this?" he said, his tone low but venomous. "Do you know how much this suit costs? You couldn't earn it in 10 years of your miserable job." He snatched the napkin from her hand and flung it aside. Then, without warning, he shoved her. Rena fell hard. The sound of her body hitting the marble was brutal. The restaurant froze. Forks stopped mid-air. The music seemed to die. Rena's knees scraped against the floor, her voice breaking. I didn't mean to..." Rowan glared down at her, every inch of him burning with disdain. "Then maybe learn to mean something, for once in your life." The silence that followed was suffocating, until a voice cut through it, and steady, deep and fierce. "Enough." Heads turned. Norah stood at the far end of the dining room, her dark skin glowing under the chandeliers, her uniform slightly wrinkled from the night's work. But there was nothing ordinary about her stance. The tray in her hands lowered slowly, her jaw set, her eyes locked on Rowan like steel. She began to walk, slow, deliberate steps echoing across the polished floor. The guests parted instinctively, the way people move when a storm approaches. Even Rowan, for a heartbeat, went still. When she stopped before him, the difference in their height didn't matter. Her voice carried the kind of weight that could shatter glass. "You don't get to do that," she said. Rowan's brows lifted, amused, then darkened. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Norah said, stepping closer. "You don't get to throw people around just because you think your money makes you more human than the rest of us." The room gasped, the kind of sound that comes from shared disbelief. Rowan's face hardened. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Norah's eyes burned. A man who just pushed a woman for doing her job. Her words landed like thunder. Rena's soft sobs echoed from the floor, and for a second, the restaurant felt charged, like the air before lightning strikes. Then came the heavy steps of Mr. Han, the manager, bursting from the kitchen. His round face glistened with sweat, voice already raised. "Norah, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" He grabbed her arm, yanking her back roughly. "Have you lost your mind?" She didn't flinch. "She's bleeding, Mr. Han." "I don't care," he barked, pushing her arm down. Then, with the speed of a switch, his tone changed as he turned toward Rowan. His entire posture melted into submission. "Mr. Cho, sir, please forgive this foolish girl. She doesn't understand her place." Rowan didn't answer. He was still watching Norah, that fire in her eyes that dared him to blink first. Mr. Han turned back to her, his voice dripping with venom. "Do you even know who you're talking to? That's Rowan Cho, heir to the Cho conglomerate. His family runs one of the biggest empires in South Korea. Hotels, tech, construction, shipping, ruthless, untouchable. You think your little paycheck can stand against that?" Norah's voice rose, trembling not with fear but conviction. "I don't care if he owns the city. Power doesn't make cruelty right, and I won't stand here and act like it does." The restaurant fell dead silent again. Even the guests seemed frozen, as though none of them could breathe. Mr. Han's face flushed red. "That's it. Get back to the kitchen before I fire you myself." Norah looked at Rena one last time, still on the floor, her cheek streaked with tears, then turned and walked toward the kitchen. Her back was straight, her steps sure. Every click of her shoes was a statement. Mr. Han bowed again, lower this time. "Mr. Cho, please forgive her insolence. I'll deal with her personally. She's nothing." Rowan's hand lifted slightly. Silence. His jaw tightened, but something unreadable flickered in his eyes. Curiosity? Confusion? Across the table, Tane, his right-hand man, leaned in and murmured, "Want me to send the boys? We can drag her back and make her regret opening her mouth." Rowan's gaze stayed on the kitchen doors Norah had disappeared through. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, coldly, "No." Tyan blinked. "You're letting her go?" Rowan's voice was low, dangerous. "If I do that, she wins." He straightened his cuffs, the rage still boiling beneath his polished calm. "But she'll see me again. That I promise." He turned sharply and strode toward the door, the weight of his presence clearing a path through the room. The glass door closed behind him with a soft hiss, leaving behind a silence thick with fear, and a strange, lingering awe for the woman who had dared to speak. The city stretched out beneath him, Seoul's skyline glittering like scattered diamonds against the night. From the top floor of Cho Tower, Rowan sat behind his massive glass desk, every inch of the office gleaming in disciplined perfection. Yet the man sitting in it was anything but composed. He should have been satisfied. That was the rule. He always controlled the narrative, always walked away with the last word. But tonight something felt different. His reflection in the glass wall stared back, the face of a man everyone feared to anger. Yet beneath the sharp cheekbones and immaculate hairline, his jaw was tight, his eyes unsettled. He'd replayed that moment in the restaurant at least a dozen times already, the sound of the wine glass tipping, the shock on the waitress's face as she stumbled backward, and then that other voice, low, defiant, cutting through the silence like steel. "You don't get to do that." The memory made his pulse quicken again. His fingers twitched against the desk, restless. How dare she? He muttered it aloud, the words falling flat against the cold air. How dare she? He pushed away from his chair and crossed the room, his shoes clicking on the marble floor. "A waitress," he whispered, half to himself. "A waitress talked back to me." Anger coiled in him, sharp and familiar, the kind that once came easily, like breathing. It was the same fury that had made grown men stammer during board meetings, the same heat that silenced entire rooms. He needed to release it. His hand reached into the drawer, pulling out a single Cuban cigar, smooth, expensive, wrapped in ritual. He rolled it between his fingers before lighting it, the faint crackle of flame echoing in the silence. The first exhale filled the air with smoke and control, or what should have been control, but the burn in his chest wasn't from the smoke. His mind refused to stay in the present. It dragged him backward, to the beginning, to the foundation of everything that made him who he was. He remembered being a boy, standing beside his father, Chairman Cho Min-hyuk, in boardrooms where grown men bowed before them. His father's voice had always carried authority, even in whispers. "People respect us, Rowan," he once said, "because they fear us. Don't confuse fear for love. It's stronger." And Rowan had learned. Fear worked. It opened doors, built towers, silenced opposition. His name was power currency, and the city ran on it. He never apologized. He never had to. Until tonight. He sat back down, elbows on the desk, fingers pressed against his temple. The smoke curled upward like a taunt, vanishing into the shadows. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No woman, no employee, no rival. They all smiled, plastic smiles carved from dependence and ambition. They laughed at his jokes, praised his cruelty when it benefited them. Even when he was wrong, they told him he was right. And yet, one stranger, one nameless black waitress, had looked him in the eye and called him out, unmoved, unafraid, unimpressed. The more he thought about it, the more his anger faltered. His pulse, though still steady, carried a strange rhythm. It wasn't rage anymore, it was something else, something he didn't recognize. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, eyes distant. Her face. It wasn't the prettiest he'd seen, not by his world standards, but there was something magnetic about it, strength where there should have been submission, fire in her stillness. It unsettled him, it fascinated him. He tried to shake it off, muttering under his breath, "She's just a waitress, a nobody." But the words lacked conviction. The clock ticked past 11. He hadn't noticed the hours slipping away. He opened a few documents on his computer, stock reports, contracts, proposals, but the words blurred together, meaningless. His mind wasn't in the office. It was back at that restaurant, in the silence after her voice. He could still see her eyes, steady and piercing, not pleading, not afraid. Rowan exhaled, rubbing his jaw. "You think I'll forget that, don't you?" he whispered, almost as if she were standing there. He picked up his phone and hesitated. His thumb hovered over the screen before he finally scrolled to one name, Tane. The call connected after the first ring. "Boss?" Tane's voice came through, steady, respectful. Rowan didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched. Then, in a low voice, "We're going back to that restaurant tomorrow." There was a long pause on the other end, longer than usual. "The same one?" "Yes." Another silence. Tane was careful, always careful. But this time, Rowan could hear the hesitation. "Sir, may I ask why?" Rowan took a slow drag from his cigar, eyes on the skyline. The smoke framed his reflection like a ghost. "Because I want to see her again." For a few seconds, only static filled the line. Then a quiet, incredulous breath. "Her? The waitress?" Rowan's voice softened, dangerously calm. "You heard me." Tane hesitated again, clearly unsure what to make of it. This was not the man he'd known for years, the man whose temper once made executives tremble, but Tane knew better than to question him twice. "Understood, boss." The line went dead. Rowan set the phone down gently, then leaned back in his chair. The cigar had burned halfway, its ember glowing faintly. He stared at it, the slow decay, the quiet burn. Something about it felt familiar. Outside, the city moved in rhythm, lights flickering, cars streaming below, life unfolding. Inside, the heir to a billion-dollar dynasty sat in silence, the weight of a single encounter pressing harder than the empire he ruled. He told himself he was in control, that he just wanted to teach her a lesson. But the truth, the one he refused to speak aloud, was much simpler. He just wanted to see her again. The smoke curled upward, fading into the cold blue shadows of his office. Rowan Cho sat there, unmoving, his reflection split by the glass, one half pride, the other something else. Something he didn't have a name for yet. While Rowan Cho sat in his glass office high above Seoul, cigar smoke curling like restless ghosts around his thoughts, another storm brewed across town. Inside the cramped back office of Cielo's fine dining, manager Han's voice tore through the silence like a whip. "You're unbelievable, Norah," he barked, slamming his palm against the cluttered desk. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you even realize whose son you stood up to?" Norah sat across from him, calm but tense, her uniform still stained with spilled wine. The air was thick with stale coffee and anger. "I know what I did," she said quietly. Han scoffed. "You know what you did?" He laughed, sharp and bitter. "You embarrassed this restaurant. You embarrassed me. That man you screamed at. He's Rowan Cho, the heir to the Cho group." He leaned closer, his breath hot with fury. His father could buy this entire block just to burn it down for fun. One phone call, Norah, and you'd disappear from this city. Do you understand that? Norah's eyes didn't waver. "All I understand is that a customer pushed a girl to the floor and no one said a word." Han's jaw tightened. "And you think it's your place to say something? You think your little voice matters?" He sneered, circling around the desk like a predator sizing its prey. "You poor, arrogant girl. You come here from God knows where. You need this job more than anyone. And yet you open your mouth at the worst possible time. Do you even realize how replaceable you are?" "I'm not replaceable to myself," Norah said, her tone soft but steady. "And that's enough for me." Han froze, momentarily thrown off by the calm defiance in her voice. His nostrils flared as he forced a laugh. "Big words for someone who can't even pay next month's rent. You think that Cho boy won't remember your face? You think he won't ruin you just to prove a point?" "If he does," she said, her voice tightening, "then it'll only prove mine, that people like him believe they own everyone." That broke his temper. Han slammed a folder so hard the papers fluttered. "That's it. You're done here, fired, and don't expect a single one for this month. You don't deserve a dime after humiliating this place." Norah's composure cracked just slightly. "But I've worked more than half the month. That's not fair." "Fair?" Han cut her off with a cruel laugh. "Life isn't fair, sweetheart, especially not for people like you. Take your self-righteous attitude and get out before I make a call that ruins what little chance you still have in this city." For a long moment, Norah said nothing. She stood, back straight, hands trembling but eyes firm. "You can take the job," she said quietly, "but you won't take my dignity." Han rolled his eyes and waved her away. "Save the speech. Go pack up before security does it for you." She turned and walked out, her footsteps heavy but composed. The narrow hallway felt longer than ever. Every stare from the kitchen staff stung, some sympathetic, some scared. As she neared the back door, a soft voice called behind her. "Norah." Rena stood there, still shaken, eyes red and swollen from crying. She hesitated, then stepped forward, clutching her apron like a shield. "Thank you for standing up for me. No one's ever done that before." Norah's chest tightened. For a moment she didn't know what to say. Then she placed a gentle hand on Rena's shoulder. "Take care of yourself," she whispered, "and don't ever let anyone treat you like you don't matter." Rena nodded quickly, tears spilling again as Norah turned away. She pushed open the back door and stepped out into the Seoul evening. The cold air hit her face like reality. For a moment she stood there, breathing hard, fighting the ache in her chest. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. Inside her, regret and pride battled silently. She thought of her parents back in Nigeria, their tired smiles, their worn hands. Her mother's voice echoed faintly. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small, Norah. Even if the world tells you to bow, stand tall." Her lip quivered, but she straightened herself. The city lights shimmered ahead like faraway stars. She had nothing left here, but she still had her voice. She began walking down the narrow street, the soft click of her shoes fading into the noise of the city. And far away, in a high-rise office overlooking Seoul, Rowan Cho exhaled a long breath of smoke, her face still haunting his mind. Neither of them knew it yet, but that moment, that clash of pride and defiance, had already bound their worlds together. The morning broke cold and grey over Seoul, a fine mist hanging above the glass towers that pierced the clouds. Inside a sleek black Maybach gliding through the city, Rowan Cho sat silent in the back seat, his eyes fixed on the rain-streaked window. His reflection stared back at him. Sharp suit, flawless hair, and yet something was off. Something in his expression didn't belong there. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, that waitress with fire in her voice and defiance in her gaze. Norah. The name had carved itself somewhere inside him, uninvited, unwelcome. The car's interior was quiet, except for the low hum of the engine and the faint rhythm of rain tapping the glass. Taeyeon sat beside the driver, glancing back now and then through the rearview mirror. He could feel Rowan's mood, the way the air around him seemed charged. Rowan finally broke the silence. "What would you say to a woman who talks to you like that?" Taeyeon blinked, caught off guard. "Like what, sir?" "You know." Rowan's gaze shifted toward the passing skyline. "Like she doesn't care who you are." Taeyeon hesitated. I'd probably have her fired, which is exactly what you almost did yesterday. Rowan's jaw flexed. That's not what I asked. Tyne turned halfway in his seat, studying him. Sir, forgive me, but why are we talking about this waitress? You were furious yesterday. I thought you'd forgotten her by now. I just want to know why someone like her wouldn't be afraid, Rowan said, his tone clipped as if he were trying to convince himself. I'm going to confront her. Ask her what gave her the courage to stand there and talk back. Taine's brow furrowed. Confront her? You could have sent me, sir. Rowan's eyes snapped toward him, a glare sharp enough to freeze the air. Did I ask you to go in my place? Taine swallowed, shaking his head. No, sir. Then don't suggest it. The car fell into heavy silence again, only broken by the distant hiss of tires against wet pavement. Tyne exchanged a quick look with the driver, then faced forward, hiding the faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. His boss was restless, and it wasn't just anger this time. When they arrived at Cielo's Fine Dining, the same restaurant Rowan had turned into chaos just a day before, the manager was already waiting outside. Han's posture was bent low, his grin far too eager. Mr. Cho. Han bowed deeply as Rowan stepped out, rain glistening on his tailored coat. Welcome back, sir. I was hoping you'd return. I took care of the unfortunate situation from yesterday. Rowan stopped mid-stride, his expression unreadable. What situation? Han straightened a little, trying to sound proud. The girl, sir, the one who disrespected you. I fired her this morning, personally. Taine froze. The air around them shifted instantly. Rowan's gaze lifted slowly to meet Han's, and for a moment there was silence. Dangerous, heavy silence. You did what? Rowan's voice was low, cold. Han blinked, unsure if he'd heard wrong. I fired her, sir. I thought... Who told you to do that? Rowan's tone cut like a blade. Han stammered. I thought it was what you wanted. You were upset and... Rowan's voice exploded like thunder. Did I say you could make that decision for me? The restaurant's doorman flinched. Tan stepped forward instinctively, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the trembling manager. Han's fake confidence crumbled. He began to bow repeatedly, his voice shaking. I'm sorry, sir, please forgive me. I didn't mean to overstep. I can fix it. I'll get her address. Get her address, Rowan ordered sharply. Now. Han nodded frantically and rushed back inside. Tyne turned to Rowan, brow raised. You're going after her? Rowan's expression was hard to read, somewhere between irritation and something softer, unspoken. I'm going alone, he said finally. Tyne blinked. Alone? Rowan didn't repeat himself. He simply opened the car door and drove off. Tyne stepped back, confused but obedient, watching his boss drive off. For years, Rowan Cho had been untouchable, unreadable, but something in his demeanor that morning wasn't the usual ruthless confidence. It was something else, something dangerously close to curiosity. And Tan, standing outside the restaurant, could only mutter under his breath, This is going to be trouble. At Norah's apartment, the knock came again, soft but firm enough to echo through the small apartment. Norah froze halfway to the kitchen sink, her hand still wet with soap and water. She wasn't expecting anyone. For a brief second she thought about ignoring it, but something about the rhythm of that knock, steady, deliberate, made her wipe her hands and walk toward the door. When she opened it, her breath caught. Standing at her doorstep, framed by the dim hallway light, was Rowan. He looked different from the previous day, not angry, not arrogant, just strangely composed. Still, a shiver ran down her spine. Why was he here? Her mind flashed back to the restaurant, the sound of Rena hitting the floor, the heavy silence that followed, her own voice rising against him. Fear crept into her chest. Had he come to punish her? To show her what happens to people who challenge him? Mr. Rowan? She asked cautiously, gripping the edge of the door. What are you doing here? For a moment, he said nothing. Then his lips curved faintly, almost amused. I came to apologize, he said, his tone too casual to sound sincere. About yesterday, don't usually act that way." The words felt off, empty, rehearsed. Norah blinked, stunned. The Rowan she'd seen yesterday didn't seem capable of apology, not even to the restaurant owner. And yet here he was, standing at her modest apartment door, saying the word sorry as if it meant nothing. Was this some kind of game to him? She forced herself to stay composed, hiding the unease tightening her stomach. "It's okay," she said lightly. "Just be better next time." She expected him to nod and leave, maybe even smirk before walking away. But Rowan didn't move. He stayed there, eyes locked on hers, as if waiting for something else. Then came the question, calm, almost teasing. "Won't you invite me in?" Her brows furrowed. "Excuse me?" Before she could even decide how to respond, he had already stepped past her, brushing against the doorway as though he owned the place. His cologne filled the air, sharp, commanding. And suddenly, the walls of her small apartment felt too close. Norah stood still, speechless. He looked around, studying the simple furniture, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the single framed photo by the window. Then, without invitation, he sat on her sofa, relaxed, almost too comfortable. What do you want, sir?" she finally managed, keeping her voice steady even though her pulse wasn't. Rowan leaned back, resting one arm along the couch. "I want to know more about you," he said, as though that explained everything. Norah blinked. "About me?" He nodded, watching her. "You stood up to me. No one does that. I want to understand what kind of person you are." His tone wasn't angry. It was curious, disarming in a way that only made her more uncomfortable. Norah took a slow breath, her hands clasped in front of her. "With all due respect, Mr. Rowan," she said quietly, "there's nothing to know. You apologized, I accepted. That's all." But he didn't move. His gaze stayed fixed on her, searching, calculating. Finally, she raised her eyes to meet his. "If you really want to understand, then know this," she said, her tone calm but cutting. "I'm someone who treats people right, not like you, walking around as if everyone else is beneath you." The air between them changed. His jaw tightened. "You have no idea who you're talking to," he said, his voice low, simmering with anger. "I know exactly who you are," she replied, unflinching, "and I'll talk better when you learn to respect people." For a moment, silence. Heavy. Unyielding. Then, Rowan stood abruptly, his face darkened, pride wounded. Without another word, he turned and walked out, the door slamming behind him with a sharp finality that echoed through the quiet room. Norah stood there, heart pounding, staring at the door long after he was gone. The air still smelled faintly of him, power, arrogance, and something else she couldn't name. Rowan didn't remember much of the drive back. The city lights blurred past his car window, Seoul's skyline a streak of gold and white against the night, but his mind wasn't in the city. It was in that small apartment, that tiny, quiet space where Norah had stood her ground like she owed the world no apology. He could still hear her voice, steady, unflinching. "I'll talk better when you learn to respect people." No one had ever spoken to him that way. Not his board members. Not the women who pretended to love him. Not even his father. When he walked into his office, the world felt unusually quiet. The scent of expensive cigars still lingered from the night before, mingling with the soft hum of the city outside the glass walls. He loosened his tie, ran a hand through his hair, and sank into the leather chair behind his desk. But the peace didn't come. Every time he tried to push Norah out of his thoughts, her eyes came back. Dark, fearless, almost haunting. "Boss?" Rowan looked up sharply. Thalia stood by the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. His expression carried that easy smirk that only long-time friends could wear. "So," Thalia said, setting the coffee down, "how did it go with your waitress?" Rowan's glare was sharp enough to silence a room. Thalia chuckled, holding up his hands. Okay. Guessing not great then." Rowan leaned back, exhaling slowly. "She's different," he said finally. "I apologized, and she didn't even blink. She spoke to me like..." He paused, jaw tightening. Like she didn't care who I was. Tyne raised an eyebrow. Maybe she doesn't. That thought irritated him more than it should have. He looked away, eyes tracing the skyline. I don't understand her. Most people, I can read them. I know what they want. But her... He shook his head, almost frustrated. I can't figure her out. Tyne studied him quietly, then leaned against the desk. You're falling for her. Rowan's eyes snapped back. What? You heard me, Tyne said, half grinning. You can't stop thinking about her. You're talking about her like she's a puzzle you're dying to solve. That's not confusion, that's interest. Rowan scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. I just want to know what kind of woman she is, the type that dares to talk to me like that. Tyne laughed softly. Sure, keep telling yourself that. Rowan didn't respond. He simply looked away again, out the wide glass window where the nightlights shimmered across the Han River. His reflection stared back at him, unreadable. There was something about Norah that unsettled him. It wasn't just her defiance. It was the way she carried herself, the quiet strength behind her calm voice. She didn't seek validation or fear consequence, and somehow that made him want to see her again, to challenge her, to understand her. But Rowan wasn't used to chasing anyone. People came to him, they always did. So instead of following Tyne's quiet advice, you'll have to be a gentleman to get close to her, Rowan decided to let her come to him. In his world, attention was a currency, and gifts were his language of power. The next morning, a bouquet of pristine white lilies was sent to Norah's apartment. She sent them back. 2 days later, a delivery man appeared at her door again, this time holding a small velvet box with a silver bracelet inside. The note read, "For the woman who doesn't flinch." It came back unopened. Then came a designer handbag, then fine perfume. Each time, Norah refused to even touch them, returning the packages at the point of delivery. The last one wasn't a gift. It was a job offer, a position at one of Rowan's sister companies with a salary that could have changed her life. But when the courier came back that afternoon, the sealed envelope was still in his hand. Rowan sat at his desk when Tyne walked in again, tossing a folded paper onto the table. She declined. Again. Rowan's jaw flexed. Of course she did. Maybe you should stop trying to buy her, Tyne said quietly. Rowan's eyes flicked up, sharp. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it? The silence that followed was heavier than the room itself. Rowan turned away, pretending to focus on the city skyline, but deep down he knew. She was right to reject it all. Norah understood something he didn't. If she took even one gift, he'd think he owned her. And that thought, that possibility, was exactly what she refused to allow. For the next few days, Rowan tried to drown himself in work. Endless meetings, reports, calls. But nothing silenced that one quiet voice in his mind that sounded too much like Norah. Her words lingered like perfume in a room long after she'd left. I'll talk better when you learn to respect people. He had replayed them enough times to almost hear his mother's voice behind them. That memory hurt. It had been years since he allowed himself to think of her. The one woman who ever stood up to his father, who spoke truth even when it hurt, who raised him to believe that kindness was not weakness. And somehow, this girl, this ordinary, fearless girl, carried that same fire. One evening, Rowan stood by his office window, the skyline of Seoul glittering below him, a glass of whiskey in hand. Tyne sat on the couch across the room, silent for once, studying his friend. "You're quiet these days," Tyne said eventually, "and you haven't thrown your phone at anyone in 3 days. Should I be worried?" Rowan chuckled, a soft, genuine sound that surprised them both. "I think you were right," he said after a moment. "About her." Tyne arched an eyebrow. "Oh? Miracles do happen." Rowan turned from the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "She's different. She reminds me of my mother. That strength, that fire. It's strange. I didn't realize how much I missed seeing that in someone." Tyne's teasing smile softened. "Then stop playing games, Rowan. Go to her. And this time, don't show up with gifts or bodyguards. Show up as you. Rowan set his glass down, a decision already forming behind his calm expression. Then that's what I'll do. The next afternoon, Norah heard a knock at her door. When she opened it, she froze. Rowan stood there, dressed simply this time. No suit, no arrogance in his posture, just quiet confidence and something almost human in his eyes. She crossed her arms. "What do you want this time?" "I came to apologize," he said softly. "Properly this time." Norah blinked. That tone wasn't one she was used to from him. "You already did that," she said, cautious. "Not like this." He looked down briefly, then back at her. "I was wrong. I acted like someone who forgot his mother's lessons." There was a brief silence between them, broken only by the hum of the city outside. "I'd like to take you out," he said suddenly. "One date, dinner, no games." Norah frowned. "You're persistent, aren't you?" He gave a small, crooked smile. "You've noticed." Then, folding his arms, half teasing, he added, "I'm not leaving until you say yes." She sighed, pretending to be annoyed, but a tiny smile betrayed her. There was something disarming about this version of him. Still, she shook her head. "You're impossible." "Maybe," he said, leaning lightly against the doorframe. "But I'm trying." She hesitated, eyes studying him, the sincerity, the hint of vulnerability hidden beneath all that polished confidence. Finally, she sighed again. "Fine. One date." Rowan's grin was immediate. "You won't regret it." That evening, Seoul glittered beneath the city's nightlights. The restaurant Rowan chose was one of the finest, the kind with live piano music and chandeliers that looked like liquid stars. When they walked in together, people turned. But this time, Rowan wasn't the arrogant man from before. He smiled at the staff, thanked the waitress who led them to their table, even nodded politely to the cleaner sweeping by the corner. Norah noticed. For a while, they ate in silence, both cautious. But then Rowan asked about her, where she grew up, what she wanted to do, what made her leave Nigeria for Seoul. She told him slowly at first, about her parents, about hard work, about their dream that she'd have a better life. And Rowan listened, really listened. It startled her how attentive he was, his gaze steady, his interruptions gentle, his laughter low and genuine whenever she made a small joke. At some point, she caught herself smiling, realizing how easily his warmth had melted the tension between them. By dessert, Rowan was making quiet jokes just to hear her laugh again. His laughter was softer now, less forced, and for once he wasn't the billionaire heir commanding attention. He was just a man enjoying a conversation that felt real. When he drove her home, the air between them felt different, lighter, filled with something unspoken. Norah found herself stealing glances at him as the car rolled through the Seoul streets. His sharp jawline, the calm concentration in his eyes as he drove. He looked nothing like the man who once pushed a waitress to the floor. When their eyes met, he caught her staring. He smiled, slow, teasing, warm. Outside her apartment, he walked her to her door. For a moment they both lingered there, neither wanting the night to end. "I'll pick you up tomorrow," he said, the old commanding tone slipping out instinctively. Norah arched a brow, that same fearless look returning. He froze, realizing his mistake, then let out a soft laugh. "Sorry, I meant, when will you be free again?" Her lips curved slightly. "Now that's better." He waited, almost boyishly eager. She smiled at him, calm and amused. "Tomorrow's fine." Rowan's smile widened, bright and unguarded. He nodded, then turned to leave, but not before glancing back once more, that same subtle awe in his eyes. As the door closed behind her, Norah leaned against it quietly, her heart unexpectedly light. She couldn't explain it, but for the first time since she met him, she wanted to see him again. The change didn't happen overnight, but it was impossible not to notice. At the Cho Empire headquarters, whispers began to ripple through the marble corridors about how Rowan Cho, The man who once ruled through silence and fear now greeted his staff with something dangerously close to kindness. Assistants exchanged bewildered glances when he said thank you. Cleaners froze mid-step when he held open a door. Even Tan, who had long perfected the art of dodging Rowan's temper, could barely believe the transformation he was witnessing. It wasn't just that Rowan was calm, he was human. And every trace of that humanity led back to one name: Norah. Thalia noticed how his friend now smiled at his phone for no reason, how he lingered by the window during work hours, lost in thoughts that clearly weren't about numbers or meetings. He'd never seen Rowan this way, not for a woman, not for anyone. But beneath his happiness, Thalia carried a quiet dread. He knew what the elder Cho would think, the billionaire patriarch who built an empire on power and control. His son, the heir, falling for a former waitress? That wasn't love in his world. That was weakness. And yet, Thalia couldn't bring himself to warn Rowan, not when, for the first time, the man was truly alive. Across the city, gossip had begun to stir. The neighbors in Norah's building watched every time that sleek black car pulled up to her modest apartment complex. They whispered as she stepped out, radiant and smiling, a former waitress now chauffeured by Seoul's youngest billionaire heir. The stories started small, then spread like smoke. Tales that she'd been hired for private company, that she wasn't really dating him, that no girl from her world could capture a man like Rowan Cho without selling something of herself. Norah pretended not to care, but the whispers echoed louder each night when she lay awake staring at the ceiling. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was chasing something impossible. What could she offer someone like him besides more scandal, more disapproval, more noise? She tried to reason with herself that it was best to end things now, before either of them got hurt. But no matter how she tried to silence her thoughts, she found herself replaying his laughter, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. She was falling for him, deeply. That same night, miles away in his penthouse, Rowan stood before his mirror, straightening his tie. His reflection stared back, calm, steady, resolute. He had made up his mind. He was going to tell Norah how he truly felt. No more pride, no more hiding behind the Cho name, just truth. He wanted her, not as a fling, not as an accessory, but as the woman who had changed everything he thought he knew about himself. "Big night?" Thalia asked from behind, smirking. Rowan turned, adjusting his cufflinks. "I'm asking her to be mine." Thalia froze, half smiling, half worried. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious." Thalia let out a slow sigh. "Then I hope you're ready for what comes with that." Rowan looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "Nothing," Thalia said softly. "Just be prepared." The restaurant shimmered with quiet elegance. Soft lighting, wine glasses catching golden hues, a faint melody from the grand piano filling the air. Norah arrived early. She'd spent hours convincing herself that this would be the end, that she would tell him it couldn't continue, that the world they came from was too far apart. But when she saw him walking toward her, wearing that half smile that made his sharp features soften, her resolve faltered. He sat across from her, eyes warm, voice low. "You look beautiful tonight." "Thank you," she said quietly, folding her hands on her lap, her heart pounding. Before she could begin, Rowan leaned forward slightly. "Norah, before you say anything, let me speak." Something in his tone silenced her. "I used to think power was everything," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "That people existed to be controlled or ignored. But you..." He paused, smiling faintly. "You walked into my life and turned that belief upside down. You made me remember who I wanted to be. You made me better." Her eyes glistened. He took a breath. "I love you, Norah, and I want you in my life." Norah froze, lips trembling. Tears welled before she could stop them. For a moment, she forgot the gossip, the gap between their worlds. All she could see was the sincerity in his eyes, She wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe it could work. But then, a shift in the air. A hush swept through the restaurant. A faint murmur spread as a small entourage entered, their polished shoes tapping in measured rhythm against the marble floor. Rowan's expression faltered. His breath caught. His father. Cho Min-seok, the titan of the Cho Empire, strode in with the commanding aura of a man who didn't walk into rooms, but conquered them. Sharp suit, silver cufflinks, eyes cold enough to still the air. Even the waiters bowed lower than usual. Rowan's hands clenched under the table. His pulse began to race. Norah sensed it, the sudden tension, the fear that rippled through him like a quiet storm. The elder Cho stopped beside their table. His gaze swept over Norah, sharp and assessing, before landing on his son. "I didn't know you were entertaining employees outside of work, Rowan." The color drained from Rowan's face. His mind scrambled, words tripping over themselves as panic set in. He opened his mouth, the voice that commanded boardrooms now trembling. She's one of our employees, father." The silence that followed was brutal. Every table nearby went still. The pianist's hands hovered uncertainly above the keys. Norah's expression changed, disbelief first, then the slow wash of humiliation that burned behind her eyes. Her chest tightened, as if the air itself rejected her presence. The man who had just told her she made him better had just erased her with a single sentence. Cho Min-seok's lips curved in a faint, satisfied nod. "Good. Keep your affairs professional, son." And just like that, he turned away, the authority of his stride slicing through the tension as his entourage followed. Norah stood frozen, her fingers trembling as she reached for her purse. Her voice, when it came, was soft, almost too soft. "Thank you for dinner." Rowan's mouth opened, but no words came. His throat tightened. His heart pounded with guilt and shame, but the damage was already done. She turned and walked away, each step quiet but final, the sound echoing through the restaurant like a fading heartbeat. Rowan sat there, unmoving, his reflection flickering in the wineglass before him. The laughter, the music, the murmurs of other diners blurred into a dull hum. And for the first time in his life, Rowan Cho didn't feel powerful. He felt hollow, completely hollow. The city outside the restaurant was alive, neon signs flickering against the wet pavement, the soft hum of passing cars breaking the night's silence. But for Norah, everything felt muted. She stepped out into the cool air, her heartbeat pounding like distant thunder. The tears she'd been holding finally broke free, trailing down her cheeks as she walked faster, her breath trembling. Behind her, the restaurant doors slammed open. "Norah!" Rowan's voice cut through the night. She stopped, only because his voice didn't sound like the arrogant man she'd once known. It was cracked, desperate. He jogged toward her, his tie loosened, eyes frantic. "Please, just listen." She turned, cutting him off with a look that said more than words could. Her voice trembled, but her tone was steady. "Listen? To what, Rowan? That it was all a mistake? That the man who said he loved me couldn't even stand up for me when it mattered most?" He flinched, his jaw tightening. "You don't understand." "No," she snapped softly, her voice breaking in the middle. "I understand perfectly. You were scared. Scared of losing your father's approval, scared of the name you carry, but you weren't scared of losing me. That's the difference." Her words hit him like a physical blow. He stepped closer, his breath uneven. "Norah, please. It wasn't like that. I panicked. His voice cracked. "I didn't mean to hurt you." She let out a shaky laugh, one that sounded more like pain than amusement. "You didn't mean to, but you did. You made me feel small again, like I didn't belong beside you. And I promised myself I'd never feel that way again." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. His voice fell into a whisper, raw, trembling. "I can't lose you like this." Norah's eyes softened for a fleeting moment, then hardened again. "You already have, Rowan." She took a step back. The wind carried her next words like a quiet verdict. You can't keep trying to love me from the world that taught you to look down on people like me." And with that, she turned. No more tears, no hesitation. Her silhouette faded into the stream of city lights, leaving Rowan standing there, hollow and alone. The world around him kept moving, cars passing, people talking, laughter echoing faintly. But inside him, everything had gone still. Later that night, Rowan stumbled into his penthouse, the door slamming shut behind him. The silence was deafening. He poured himself a drink, then another. The liquor burned down his throat, but couldn't drown the ache in his chest. He paced the room, his tie hanging loose, his hair disheveled. "Why did I say that?" he muttered. "Why couldn't I just stand by her?" He slammed the glass down, shards scattering across the counter. The sound echoed, sharp and final. He stared into the mirror opposite him. The reflection staring back wasn't Rowan Cho, heir to a billion-dollar empire. It was a broken man, eyes red, lips trembling, haunted by the ghost of someone better. He leaned closer to the mirror, voice low, almost trembling. "You're your father's son," he whispered. Cold, proud, coward. The words hit harder than any blow could. He turned away, but the memories came rushing in, flashes of his mother's face, her warm smile, her gentle voice. The last time he saw her, she had said softly, "Rowan, never let power make you forget how to love." His hand clenched into a fist. "I failed you again, Mother," he whispered. His voice cracked, the sound dissolving into the stillness of the room. He sank into a chair, staring blankly at the city skyline. Outside, the lights of Seoul stretched endlessly, cold and distant, just like the man he had become. For days afterward, the world didn't see him. No calls, no meetings, no appearances. Behind the locked doors of his penthouse, Rowan sat alone with his thoughts, surrounded by luxury, but drowning in regret. Norah, meanwhile, tries to move on. She gets a new job at a quiet cafe on the edge of Seoul, a place with soft jazz, warm lights, and faces that don't know her story. She deletes her old photos, avoids social media, and stays far from the districts where she could ever cross paths with Rowan. But it's not easy. Every now and then, something pulls her back. A familiar cologne from a passing customer, the sound of a deep voice that almost sounds like his. She remembers the way he tried, awkwardly at first, to be kind. The rare moments when his walls fell, and she saw the man behind the arrogance. She realizes, painfully, that she still loves him. But love was never the problem. It was pride. It was power. It was the weight of two worlds that could never truly meet in the middle. Meanwhile, Rowan sits alone in his penthouse, staring out over Seoul's skyline. The city looks the same, but he doesn't. He thinks of Norah, the only person who ever stood up to him without fear, the only person who made him question the kind of man he was becoming. He decides he won't let one moment of weakness destroy something so rare. Not her. Not this. For too long, he's lived in the shadow of a name. His father's empire, his father's rules, his father's cold expectations. But as he looks into his reflection, he realizes something. He's not his father's puppet. He's his own man. He has power, yes, wealth, yes, but none of it matters if he can't own his choices. He whispers to himself, "I built this life with my hands, not to live afraid of another man's opinion." His jaw tightens with resolve. If I lose her again, it won't be because I stayed silent. Rowan stands, straightens his suit, and looks out one last time at the city lights. The decision is made. He will repair what he broke, not with gifts, not with pride, but with humility. And for the first time in his life, he's ready to fight, not for power, but for love. Days turned into weeks, and yet Rowan couldn't move on. The echo of Norah's voice haunted him. "You can't rewrite the world that made you this way, Rowan." Those words carved into him like truth he could no longer ignore. Then one morning, he made a decision. No driver, no luxury car, no tailored suit. Just him, a man stripped of everything but remorse and love. He found the small cafe where Norah now worked. Through the glass window, he saw her, radiant in her simplicity, her hair tied back, her smile faint but strong. She looked peaceful, as if she had finally learned how to live without him. And that hurt most of all. He stepped inside quietly. The bell above the door chimed, drawing her eyes toward him. The moment their gazes met, the world slowed. Her breath caught. The cup she was holding nearly slipped. Rowan didn't rush to her. He waited in line like everyone else, for the first time in his life, waiting his turn for something that truly mattered. When it was finally his turn, he stood before her, hands trembling slightly, voice low but heavy with emotion. "I don't deserve to stand here," he began. "I was born into a world that taught me power was everything, that feelings were weakness, and I believed it until I met you. You saw through every wall I built. You made me question who I was and who I wanted to be." Norah's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. He continued, voice breaking slightly. "That night at the restaurant, I saw the fear in my father's eyes and I became him. I betrayed everything you brought out in me. You didn't just stand up to me, Norah. You stood up for me. You reminded me that love isn't about control. It's about courage. And I failed you." He took a step closer, lowering his tone as if the words themselves carried the weight of his soul. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to see me now. Not as Rowan the billionaire, not as the man who hurt you, but as someone who's finally learned what love means. You're the first person who made me want to be human again." Silence filled the cafe. The other customers had stopped pretending not to watch. The hum of machines, the chatter, everything stilled. Rowan's voice trembled as he finished, "I love you, Norah. Not with pride, not with ego, but with the kind of love that bends me to my knees. You changed me, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it, even if you never take me back. But if there's still a place for me beside you, I promise I'll never let fear take it from me again." Tears streamed down Norah's face before she could stop them. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "You really mean that?" He nodded, eyes glistening. Every word, every breath. Something in her finally gave way. The wall she'd built, the pain she'd carried. She stepped out from behind the counter, and for a heartbeat, the world went still. Then she ran into his arms. Rowan held her tightly, burying his face in her shoulder as if afraid she'd vanish. The cafe erupted in soft applause. Strangers smiling, some wiping tears. Norah looked up at him through her tears, whispering, "You took your time." He smiled faintly. "I had to learn how to walk to you, without the world in the way." And as they stood there, surrounded by warmth, forgiveness, and quiet joy, the world outside the cafe felt small, irrelevant.
I'm really glad you were here for this story and stayed with me through to the end. I'd love to hear what you think about it. Leave a comment and share your thoughts. I always look forward to the stories you share too. The next story I have for you is even more special, and I don't want you to miss it. So make sure you subscribe and tap the notification bell so you'll know the moment it's out. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, may God bless you in all your endeavors. Bye.